Hi everyone, I'm Jenna Paone from Almighty Blaze. Here today with me is best-selling author Fiona Davis. Welcome, Fiona. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this, I'm sorry we're not going live today. This is being posted later on, blame Facebook. And I feel so sorry because Fiona had, the last time that Fiona was on with me, we had a few technical Facebook difficulties as well. And this is just getting, this is just getting crazy. So
But we're going with the flow. We're good with it. We got it.
is a rock star. This just proves how lovely she is. Thank you so much, Fiona, for your patience and your understanding. And thank you to all of you for watching. And we're still going to have a great conversation. And please, of course, feel free to reach out to Fiona on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram with any questions that you weren't able to ask live in this format. Because I know she loves interacting with her fans, would love to hear from you. So we'll be posting all the links to her socials so that you can reach out and say, hey, and I loved your book directly. Anyways, without further ado, we are here today celebrating The Lions of Fifth Avenue, Fiona's latest release. Woo! Yes. Oh, it's so good. Oh my God. I love it so much. And the cover is incredible. The book, of course, is incredible. Congratulations. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you. It's been almost 2 weeks since it launched, and it's been a whirlwind, but a really good one. I've been having a blast.
That's so great. And I have to just mention right off the bat that The Lions of Fifth Avenue was recently named a Good Morning America book pick for August. Congratulations. How
Thank
does it
you.
feel?
It was amazing when when we found out the whole team. There's a team behind me of publicists and marketing people and agents and editors and everybody at Dutton, and it really just felt like we all were celebrating because putting out a book is a group effort, and so to get the GMA pick was phenomenal. I'm over the moon.
Congratulations. It's so well earned, so well deserved. I'm thrilled to see your work being celebrated on such a large format, large scale. And we are going to get into our discussion. First, I'm going to give you guys a little background on Fiona in case maybe some of you aren't as familiar with her. But Fiona is, I'm sure you are. Fiona Davis is the nationally best-selling author of The Dollhouse, The Chelsea Girls, The Masterpiece, and other works of historical fiction that delve into the mysterious and glamorous past and present of New York City. Fiona began her career in New York City as an actress, where she worked on Broadway, off-Broadway, and in regional theater. After getting a master's degree at Columbia Journalism School, which we'll talk about because there's a tie-in with your book, she fell in love with writing, leapfrogging from editor to freelance journalist before finally settling down as an author of historical fiction. She is a graduate of the College of William and Mary and is based in New York City. Her new release, The Lions of Fifth Avenue, which is out now, revolves around a series of book thefts that roils the iconic New York Public Library, leaving two generations of strong-willed women to pick up the pieces. It is a Good Morning America's book club pick for August, a library reads pick for August, one of the New York Post's best summer books, and a She Reads pick for best historical fiction in 2020. Publishers Weekly calls The Lions of Fifth Avenue a delightful mystery. The characters and story are stellar. Book Tribe says Fiona Davis once again brilliantly captures time and place in a story of mystery, misfortune, and romance in a Manhattan that we recognize yet seems just out of reach, especially now. And Booklist says bibliophiles and fans of Naomi Wood and Paula McLean will especially enjoy this glimpse inside the history of the institution and the tireless dedication of those who serve it. Fiona, congratulations, and thank you so much again for being here.
Oh, thank you. That was the most marvelous introduction. I appreciate it.
Oh, it is all just facts. These are just facts that we're reciting, and
But with such enthusiasm.
I try to put a little emotion behind it. Let's get into the book. Can you tell us a little bit more about The Lions of Fifth Avenue? Give us your elevator pitch.
Sure. So my books are all set in landmark New York City buildings, and this one is set in 1913 and 1993. And in 1913, it's from a point of view of the wife of the library superintendent. Her name's Laura, and she lives in the library in a 7-room apartment that actually existed for the superintendent and his family. And she's surrounded by all this knowledge and all these books, but she wants something more out of life. And so she applies to Columbia Journalism School and gets in, and her world is really cracked wide open. And then in 1993, it's from the point of view of a curator at the library called Sadie, and she's the head of a special collection called the Berg Collection, which is all rare books. She's putting on this big exhibit, and one of the books goes missing. And so she's drawn into a series of book thefts that happened 80 years ago, as well as a terrible tragedy that happened to the superintendent's family back then. And I like to sum it up as it's about the magic of the written word and the power of women's voices.
I love that. What a tagline. That is like the ultimate selling point. So, I mean, the library. I know when I lived in New York, it's one of those places that just is so quintessential New York. And as you said, you always choose a landmark of New York to celebrate, which there's so many to choose from. And it's the city is so rich in history. And I think often people, don't stop to think about it necessarily because it moves at such a fast pace today. But there are so many historical places with great significance that we interact with regularly, or used to before life was.
Yeah.
What about the library drew you in? Why this monument why this institution at this time?
Yeah, there, like you said, there's so many beautiful buildings in New York, and I joke around that by my 30th book, I'll be doing like the gas station on the corner of 11th Avenue or something. But the idea for this book, to do it and to hold a book and set it around the library, actually came from the readers. Because for the past 5 years, I've been doing author talks all around the country. And at every talk, people throw out their suggestions because people love New York and they have buildings that are really dear to them. And the New York Public Library came up over and over and over, which makes sense because I'm talking to people who love books and reading. Yeah. And so I started thinking, well, let me look into it. And so I started doing research. And when I discovered this article that was all about the superintendent's family and how they lived in the library for 30 years at this 7-room apartment, and that the daughter was born in the library, and that the kids used to play baseball using books as bases in the reading room until they got in trouble. And as I learned these details, I thought, well, that's a great setting, a family in a library. I can do anything with that.
It's amazing. And I'm thinking about this now, God, what a dream to like live. It makes me think very much of that, the mixed up files of Mrs. Basily Frankweiler when they stay over in the Met, but this is like even better because it's all of the books and you actually live there. So does the setting then always come first for you? Is it always, does your inspiration always come from, this magic place?
Yeah, I start with the building, definitely. And then I do research until I find something that surprises me. So, for example, with the book that's set at Grand Central, The Masterpiece, when I learned that there was an art school inside, I thought, oh, that's very cool. I'll write about that. And so I need to find the building and have it be a building that's been around long enough that I can do 2 time periods and compare and contrast. Right. But it needs to have that hook. And that's what I'm looking for in my early research.
I love that. So then let's talk about how you develop that because it makes so much sense to take that and then, really let the research lead you and then discover this amazing place. And then you have to put boundaries around it. So then, as you said, you always write in 2 timelines. There's always a connection between the 2 of them. Usually the first one is pre-1950s. It's usually early 20th century. And usually the second one is post-1950s. So, that's like my little marker for your...
You know my books well, I can tell.
Yeah. But so how did you go about... We have 2 very unique time periods that are, in my opinion, extremely ideal for this story that you're telling. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you chose 1913-14 for Laura's story and the 1990s for Sadie?
Well, the short answer is that I hadn't worked in either time period yet. And so they were new to me, but really I started looking at the 1910s because I knew the library opened in 1911. And like, that's a landmark year. So I thought, okay, maybe somewhere around there, right as it opened. So it's fresh and new. And then I started learning about what women's roles and women's rights, and how in the 1910s, they were really coming to the fore, that there was something called the New Woman. And that was all about women talking about birth control openly, which at that time was never discussed, talking about the right to vote. And so I thought, well, that's really exciting. And then when I learned that the journalism school opened in 1912 and that it was co-ed, and that I'd gone there, so I had a, that would be a really interesting setting to throw my character into. That's when I knew that time period would be right. And then in the 1990s, as I started doing research, I was reading a lot about book theft. So rare books that go missing and who took them. And there was a book theft in the 1990s that happened at Columbia University, of all things, in their Butler Library, where a thief stole $1.8 million of rare books over the period of 3 months. And no one could figure out how he was getting in and out. And when I saw that, I thought, ooh, that will be my framework for the 1990s story. And I'll just take that theft and kind of stick it into the New York Public Library. So it did not happen there, but it's inspired by a real one.
It certainly sounds as if it could have happened there. I mean, it's believable. I was like, oh, did this really happen? Because number one, I love a good heist, like especially a good art or book heist. It's something that's very, it's not dangerous necessarily, but it's very, it's still wrong and it's still mysterious and all of these things. And we'll talk a little bit more about the heist and the thefts and how you've constructed them later on. But what is it about writing in the past in general, and particularly this relatively recent past of 1900s and beyond that really appeals to you? What is it about that draws you in?
That's such a good question. I think it's discovering the things that are that a lot of what we go through as a society are cycles. And so it was just so fascinating to learn that in the 1910s, there were all these thought of women's rights, and even things like free love, which is something we associate with the 1960s or 70s. But that women were really vocal, that in Greenwich Village, there was just so much going on, and questioning traditional roles. And so I thought, well, that's fantastic, because I think we're surprised by that. We think everybody was wearing corsets and, drinking tea. And that's not true. People were out there questioning and fighting and holding protests. And so that's what I love about kind of jumping back into the past and then seeing how that blends with what's going on now, and how that resonates with everything that we're going on now, without hitting the reader over the head with it. It has to be part of the plot and the character, so that you care about this person, so that you care about the time she lives in.
That's such a great answer. I it always does strike me how timely the problems are, in your books. I always feel like with your characters, I'm looking at a situation, as you said, not being hit over the head with it, it's still a bit of an escape from my lived experience, but I'm able to relate and learn from, and be inspired by these women going through the same things in a different context, but it's the same issue that we're all still struggling with today. So thank you for writing about this. I mean, it's so great. And on that note, we have to talk about how your books always center on strong female characters. And of course, Laura and Sadie are no exceptions. Both of them are smart, driven, and they're struggling with what we still struggle with as women today, which is, their personal ambitions coming up in conflict with both societal expectations and systems that are designed to discourage them, the idea of the roles that they need to play in their lives, both professionally and personally. How do you go about crafting your characters? How did you build these two characters specifically for this story? And why is it important generally for you to center dynamic female voices in your work?
Yeah, I think that's gives them an interesting journey to go on. You want your character to have an arc, and so they need to start somewhere and end up maybe somewhere completely different. Or if they end up in the same place, that there has to be a realization as to why that place was the right one for them. And so for Laura, you know, she's a woman, I like the fact that both these women are out of step with their time.
Mhm.
And so Laura wants something more than being a wife and mother, which back then was really radical.
Yeah.
And she wants to have a passion, just as her husband, who's the super of the library, has a passion and is writing a book. And he's writing a novel, and she wants to have something similar, but it's kind of dismissed. Oh, your silly ideas. Or if you're going to be a journalist, go cover crime, children on the street, not politics and murder, because that's for the men. And so she's just out of step with her time, which really puts her in conflict with her own, with herself, with her family, and with society as a whole. And that makes a really compelling character to follow.
Absolutely.
And to write. And then Sadie in the 1990s is also out of step with her time, but in a different way. She loves old things. So she wears vintage clothes. She works with rare books, you know, and she's single, she's divorced, and she's trying to find out, she's trying to kind of figure out who she is as a woman. And so she finds this book called Surviving Spinsterhood, that was written in the 1880s, and starts following it.
Surviving.
Yeah, yeah, and that becomes her Bible as to how to, you know, live in the world as a spinster. And so she's always looking to the past, and that in a way doesn't serve her, and she has to figure out how to live in the moment in order to triumph.
Oh, so great. They're both so dynamic, and they're both so interesting. And I appreciate them being fully rounded and not, you know, you give them real traits, you know, they don't always make the right decisions. They make mistakes, which I think is so important to always have with any character, but especially, you know, it moves away from that standard, you know, female stereotype of, like, you know, they get into it. I don't want to, I'm trying to say things without saying things,
Yeah.
but, you know, readers will see these women are complex, and they're, you know, and sometimes they're problematic, and sometimes they are incredibly engaging and charming. Actually, they're always engaging and charming at the same time, which I think is, to me, what makes a great female character.
Yeah, and they're flawed. Yeah. So,
you know,
yeah.
oh, they're so great. Let's go back a little bit to the research for a second, because I would love to hear more about your actual process for researching this. Did, you know, I imagine you were looking at lots of documents and plans, and maybe going into parts of the New York Public Library that aren't always accessible to the general public. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and some of the highlights of your research?
Sure. The library was amazing. So when I first reached out and said I was writing a book and kind of introduced myself, they were wonderful, and they gave me a behind the scenes tour of some of the spaces in the library that the public can't go to, including the apartment. And that was really helpful because I could see, yeah, you could see how it's laid out. Right now it's offices and storage. So it hasn't been an apartment since 1941. But you could still see how the rooms were laid out. You could see these huge windows that looked over into an interior courtyard, and just get a sense of the kind of, it's almost like a secret stairway that leads to it. It's on a mezzanine level. And that was just helpful because I really need to get a sense of the physical space before I can start to write. And then what's amazing about the library is they have something called the Allen Room, and that's for writers with book contracts. And so if you get in there, you can sit in the library. And so there I was in this private room writing about the library in the library, which was so cool. And then if you need books on typhoid or say the history of the construction of the library, they're delivered right to your bookshelf, which is cool. And I was able to go through all the archives of the superintendent and get a sense of what his job entailed. And it was huge. He did, you know, ran the infrastructure of the building. So he did the payroll, and you could see, you know, his handwritten notes of how much each person under him got paid, and the 90 people that worked for him, and the letters from the public complaining about the bathrooms, you know. It was just, so that was just amazing, because you're thinking, wow, this was written by, you know, a real person. This, even though I'm writing fictional characters and I take the structure and then create characters from it, this was a real guy doing a real job. and that helped. And then finally, the librarians were incredibly helpful. Where you know, at one point, I had a dead body in an early draft of the book,
Of course.
and yeah, it's not there now, but there
As
was a dead
you do.
body, as one does.
As one
And,
does.
and I reached out to a librarian and I said, you know, if you had to hide a dead body in the library, where would you put it? And she wrote back immediately. Yeah, she had a location. She told me where to put it. She said she'd never gotten that question before,
Wow.
but she was very helpful. So it was win-win all around.
That's actually awesome. And what a great email to get. And like how fun that you got a response immediately. Like that's the woman that I want to know. Actually, like that's the woman I want to make friends with.
They're great. And that's what the book is about. It's about librarians and just how resourceful they are. And, you know, Sadie is a librarian and she gives such joy at finding out all the facts that people want to know, including like, when did the Statue of Liberty turn green? And she can figure that out if she needs to.
Did you have any historical tidbit or fact that you were very surprised by and really loved that you would like to share with us beyond what you've already? I know the apartment, like beyond the apartment, but something maybe about the library that people wouldn't know, or about the collection.
Yeah, there's two things that I found interesting. Was that it was built on, before it was the Croton Reservoir. And it was this huge lake almost within the city with 50-foot granite walls that held all the drinking water for New York City. And that was on the side of the library. And you could walk up to a promenade and walk around it. There's some amazing photographs of it online. And so when they built the library, they actually used some of the granite and incorporated it into the foundation. And you can see that from the southern courtyard.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And then also that when it was built, it was the largest marble structure in America, which was kind of cool.
That is really cool. And how about the lions themselves? Because of course, you know, there is a play on words. The family is the Lions family, spelled Lyons.
Yes.
But the lions, for anyone who has never been to the public library, there are two giant stone lions outside, and they are the guardians of the library, and you know, one of the most recognizable features, and something that everybody, you know, people hang out on them, they take pictures with them. They're so connected to the library. Can you tell us a little bit more about the lions and why you decided to make them the center of your title, and you know, base this family on?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's a good answer. So the lions, when they were first built, they were called Leo Astor and Leo Lennox, after the original two of the founders of the library. And the public hated them. They said they were ugly, that they looked like a cross between a dachshund and a rabbit. No one liked them, but they grew and the public got to like them, and they weren't called Patience and Fortitude, which is what they're known as, until Mayor LaGuardia named them that after Depression era virtues, which are very true right now, to be honest, here in New York. And these days in New York, the lions have 3-foot wide masks over their faces, which is beautiful. So they're all masked up, which is great.
So
and yeah, you know, the reason I actually had a different name for the family in the book as I was writing it. And I'm terrible at titles. And so my agent and my editor both came up with the title, The Lions of Fifth Avenue. And the minute I heard it, I thought, A, that's a great title. And B, I'm going to rename the family the Lions, Lyons, because then it'll have kind of a resonance of both the building and the people, which I love.
Oh, I love that. Can you share what your working title was with us? Are you comfortable doing that?
It was the library project. All I do is name it after. It's like the Barbizon Project, the Dakota, Grand Central.
Yep.
That's all I do, because I know if I have to come up with a name, it will be horrendous. I'm so bad at them.
That's great though. That's your, you know, it's your organizational way of looking at it, and like.
And again, it shows what a team effort it is. You know, it's actually incredible.
I'd love to hear a little more about your relationship with your editor and how the process works with you going back and forth, and of course, you know, your agent and your team as well. I'd love to hear a little bit. That's actually a question I don't ask very often, but it seems like you have a very collaborative relationship, and I'm wondering what that's like for you.
Yeah, as I come up with the idea for the building, I run it by my editor and my agent just to give them a sense of what I'm thinking and a basic story idea. And if they're excited about it, that gets me more excited. And then I go and I do a lot of research that takes 3 to 4 months. And then I do a first draft, which is just painful. And then I start revising it. And eventually it gets to a point where I will send it to my editor and get her feedback. And she and her two assistants are incredible we get on the phone, we hash out what's working, what's not working. They're really honest, and that's what you need. You need someone who can look at it with a fresh eye, because you don't have it after 8 drafts. You just don't. And so then I go back and work on it, and then it goes to my editor. And again, she gets on the phone. She sends me a long editorial letter, and we get on the phone and talk for 1 to 2 hours. And kind of the things that aren't working, I can throw out ideas, and eventually something will connect. I'll be like, oh, that would fix that problem. And I get so excited, when you start figuring out, oh, there's a solution to a problem that I thought I couldn't figure out.
Yeah.
And then I go back and work on it again. And then of course it goes off to proofreaders and copy editors and all that. But it's such a collaborative effort. And I think that comes from having been a journalist, where all your work goes to an editor.
Yep.
And they make it better.
And I have to mention that this all happens pretty quickly, because you publish a book every year. And that is not an easy feat. You say, I'm thinking about this, and you're like, I send it, and then eventually I write a first draft, and I'm like, but this happens quickly. Like, that first draft must happen within a few months. And then all of this, how do you maintain that pace? What is your routine, and how do you structure yourself as an independent creative to be able to keep producing, on this timeline? Clearly you have quite a work ethic. So can you talk a little bit about
I do. I definitely have a work ethic. And I think part of it is in writing a book that's dual timelines and an element of mystery. And so it's complicated, and you have to weave the timelines together carefully. And so I kind of have to do it fast, because if I take too long in between drafts, I forget a detail that's really important. So it's almost like I have to cram it all in my head and on the page at the same time. I'll admit that I do not have children, and I think that helps. And so my time is I know. My time is mine to do whatever I want with. And I have to say, I highly recommend it, but it's too late for you, Missy. And so I do write pretty fast. When I'm doing that first draft, I try and do about 1,500 words a day.
Great.
4 or 5 days a week.
Yep.
And if you just do a little bit every day like that, you end up with a book. There's just no getting around it. I don't go back and edit. I just, in that first draft, you just get it down.
Yep. You just keep moving forward. I mean, I think that really, to me, that's the way that works as well for myself, that, having a word count goal or a daily goal of X things, and like, I just need to keep the narrative pushing forward. I just need to keep doing, and then you go back and fix, which I think is maybe a common thing that people get afraid, because they're like, I don't know what happens next. And it's like, well, just do something, and then fix it later. You just have to keep it going. Talking about the mystery a little bit, because all of your books, again, are mysteries. There's almost always a mystery in both. There is always a mystery in both timelines that is related in some way. And it's hard to structure a mystery. I have like a small mystery in my thing that's like a little family mystery, and I'm like, this is the hardest thing. I like, my brain, I'm like, I am just terrible at this. Like, I would be the worst Sherlock Holmes ever. And I'm always like, there's nothing I admire more than a well-crafted mystery that's laid out by an author and really has you guessing until the very end, which this book really does. Like, you're still like, wait, what? Even as you get, then you're like, oh, like, and that oh moment is so satisfying, and it's what readers are looking for. How do you go about crafting mysteries? Do you have any sort of tips and tricks that you use? Do you have a process that you follow that you tend to go for? Do you have like your own rules for what a mystery is? I'd love to hear some more about this because
I think it was growing up reading a lot of Agatha Christie and Nancy Drew. And I just love books that are mysteries. Elizabeth George writes really great English ones. And I think it's having read a lot. And so as I do figure out my plot beforehand and I do outline so I can figure out how it will work. And usually I underplay it too much so that when my agent or my editor reads it, they're like, wait, I don't understand. And I have to bump up the clues because to me, they're so obvious, right? It's like, oh, I just gave that away. Yep. But in the scope of reading a book fresh, the clues get lost, and then they're remembered later. And that's what you want it to be surprising and inevitable. And so, yeah, I'd say just reading a lot of mysteries because then, and it's hard to step back and see it as you're writing it. So you just have to kind of wing it and hope that it will all work out and that you don't paint yourself into any corners. And you always do. I mean, it's just the way it is.
Of course. I mean, that's, yes. That is, that's interesting to hear that. And I do think that intuitive, the learning through example has always really resonated with me personally as well, of like watching others and then saying, okay, I recognize the pattern here. Here's what's happening. Because there always is a pattern. There's always a pattern of the underlying structure.
It's true. And studying like dual timeline mysteries for me, I would study them. I would write down kind of what unfolded in each chapter so I could see how they did it.
Yep. That's so smart. I love that you mentioned that because that's actually something that I do as well. Yeah. And I'm a songwriter as well. And when I first taught myself to write songs, I would go through and I would literally analyze, like, I love this song. Okay, what's their chord structure? What melodic intonations are they doing? Like, what's their, and I do the same thing with books now. And I go through and I'm like, well, what are we working with here? I love hearing you say that that's how you learned it. And as a journalist too, obviously you are used to, I'm sure, looking at a situation and analyzing it, right? Because journalism is a different skill set, but it, obviously a complementary skill set. On that note, was it interesting for you to have this character of Laura be attending the same journalism school that you yourself attended, and how was it writing that experience and reflecting on your own experience there?
They were two completely different things. So the history of the journalism school, which has been written about, and it reflects the sexism of the time where women were only 15% of the class. And that was amazing, actually, that it was even co-ed. Yep. And that they were assigned different stories, that they were kind of dismissed as, not real journalists. And my time there was incredible because I hadn't been a journalist before and I applied to the program and got in. So I was learning everything new. And it was really about learning how to think and write and shape a story in a way that was so valuable to me as a journalist and then later as an author of historical fiction. And just to show how things have changed these days, the makeup of the classes at the journalism school are 75% women. So things have changed.
That is a big difference. That is, go Columbia, and yay women. And journalism wasn't it wasn't even your first career. You were an actor for many years. And this is something we had a lovely conversation with Amy Popel one day, and we talked a little bit about this, but I'd love to hear a little more about your experience as an actor and how that informed you as a writer, what that transition was like. Was there let's start with that, and then I'll go into some sub questions.
Sure. Yeah. So I came to New York as an actress, and I worked on Broadway and off Broadway and in regional theater, and formed a theater company. I was part of a theater company with some good friends of mine, and we put on Shakespeare and Genet and all these great productions. One of our shows went to Broadway and was nominated for a Tony. It was just an incredible experience. But after about 10 years, I just realized that my friends who were older, who were women, weren't working as much. And my friends who were men were aging into these really awesome character roles, or becoming the dad role in all the commercials. And I just thought, well, that's not fair. And what else do I want to do? And so I applied to Columbia Journalism School and got in and ended up writing my thesis on the shelf life of a working actress.
Cool.
And just show like how New York actors are, how the roles dry up after a certain point. But in my studies that I did for the thesis, it showed that once you hit 70, you start working again because you're the only one standing.
To be the grandmother and
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's such an odd, I also was an actor, and it's such an odd thing that I think I have to imagine that in some way, I know for me, like having that experience of understanding the characteristics that are going to help you work as an actor, knowing yourself, knowing what you present. Your books are so clear and they know what they are. And I wonder if that comes from that, because I can't help but think it does. That you
That's
have to, as an
interesting.
actor, know what you're selling. You have to know what you're putting out there, and embrace it and accept it and really lean into it, to borrow a term. But I do notice that about your books, that they're so shelf assured and they're so, you know, even starting with the Dollhouse, your first book, it knew exactly what it wanted to be, and it was that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
It's an odd life. If anyone out there has a former acting past, then you know the strangeness of it.
Yes. Yeah. Fun, but very strange.
And obviously, the Chelsea Girls was really inspired, I'm sure, by your experiences in theater with this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that takes place in the Chelsea
Yep.
Hotel during the McCarthy era,
Yep.
with an actress and a playwright trying to put a play on Broadway. And that was, so I could draw on so much there. It was really fun to write.
Are any of your other characters informed by maybe characters or roles that you played on the stage?
No, that's so interesting. I don't think so. They all kind of become their own people as I write them. So no, but that's fascinating. Like I love Rosalind and Shakespeare. You know, she'd be great to transport her to New York. Hey, you gave me an idea. Thank
I
you.
feel like you do. Like so many of your characters have that, and your books have that dramatic quality, that cinematic quality of somebody who understands, putting a world together and really exploring it in a directorial way.
Yeah.
This is so great. We're gonna wrap up in just a few, but I'd love to know what you're working on right now and whether you can tell us anything. If there's
Sure.
okay if you can't.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm working on a book set at the Frick collection. And that's, yeah, that was good. I love that reaction. The Frick is a gem of a location on Fifth Avenue that was owned by Henry Clay Frick, and he lived there. It was a Gilded Age residence for many years, and then became an art museum, which is what it is now. So yeah, it's a wonderful location, and again, 2 time periods, and we'll see how it goes.
Oh, I'm so excited for that. I love the Frick collection. I'm a sucker for any museum that is in a historic.
Yeah.
I say, like, museums in historic homes, grand historic homes, are my favorite thing in the world.
Same here. It's great.
Other than libraries and
Yes. Yes.
Galleries. And on that note, we'll end with, we're all staying home and and we're being responsible. And quite frankly, the idea of having to quarantine doesn't seem so terrible if it could be done in the New York Public Library. What an experience. And I'm sure that family actually had to deal with that during this.
Yeah, they would have.
Actually, but if you had to quarantine or isolate in any of the buildings that you have featured so far, and with any cast of characters, which would you choose?
Oh, that is such a good question. I would love to, spend a year or so living in the Dakota, because it's such an interesting building. And I think there's even nooks and crannies still to be discovered in there. And to live there and kind of get to know the inhabitants now would be so much fun. And to look out those windows onto Central Park. I'd say the Dakota, but that's a great question.
That's so fun. Fiona Davis, thank you so much. The Lions of Fifth Avenue is out now. Good Morning America. It's a book club pick for August. And we're going to give a shout out from Fiona. If we would love for you to obviously purchase the book, and please do so through an independent bookstore if possible, because we love these stores, we want to support them, and we want their doors to be able to open again once we are all able to go and visit them. So we're going to give a shout out today in the spirit of the Dakota to Shakespeare and Company on the Upper West Side. Check them out, and please purchase Lions of Fifth Avenue from them or one of your other favorite independent bookstores. Fiona, any last words for our viewers today?
No, thank you so much, everybody. It's been a whirlwind, and I'm so appreciative of everybody's support, and Jenna for A Mighty Blaze for just doing everything you're doing to connect authors and readers in this crazy time. It is really, really terrific what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. We're so happy to have you. And you have an interview with Good Morning America coming up next week, right?
Yep, that'll be on Thursday the 20th in the morning.
Thursday the 20th. So catch Fiona on Good Morning America, and continue to celebrate the Lions of Fifth Avenue with us. Thank you so much, Fiona, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.